Good morning, folks, and welcome. I'm Rick Singleton. I'm the Provost of Queen's College, and on behalf of Queen's College, delighted to welcome you to our Continuing Education for Clergy program. We do a weekly topic, and this one is on clergy wellness. We have an advisory committee, Reverend Joanne Mercer from Central Diocese, Archdeacon Sam Rose from Eastern, and Archdeacon John Mead from Western Diocese. And so we put together a series of topics and so on, and looking at some interesting topics for the winter as well, and we'll have some advertisement out on those over the next few days. Today's session, as I say, is on clergy wellness. We welcome especially those who are going to be viewing this in a recorded format on our website and YouTube channel. If you enjoy it and think it's worthwhile, certainly send on the link to others who may benefit from it as well. So welcome to you all. So I have with me today a couple of others who are more versed in the topic of clergy wellness than I am. Father John Courage is a long-time healthcare chaplain. He's a diocesan chaplaincy coordinator for Eastern Diocese, and John's going to give a bit of overview of the theme as well, and some speaking to it from inside the life of ministry. So thank you, John, for participating. Deborah Howard is the wellness officer with Western Diocese, and Deborah, thank you for agreeing to participate and give a bit of description to the initiatives from your diocese. And Archdeacon Sam Rose is the executive officer for Eastern Diocese, and Sam also will give some description of the services that are available to clergy within Eastern Diocese, Eastern Newfoundland and Labrador. I also talked to Reverend Harvey Boland in Central, who couldn't be with us today, but gave a description of their program. We'll speak to that at that part of the program. So as I get into the topic of clergy wellness, and the subtitle in it is Balancing the Personal and Professional Sides of Life. The idea of balance and an image of balance that comes to my mind is what most of us as Newfoundlanders, or those who've been around Newfoundland, would recognize as a dory. And why it comes to mind for me is that when I was a child growing up in St. Mary's Bay, I often tell people that we had great fun in the summers, and we were down around the wharves and in the meadows and at the hay and picking berries and those kinds of things. But we used to have most fun when our towny cousins would come. And part of the fun when the towny cousins would come would be when they'd want to get out in the dory. Now, there was all kinds of dynamics in that, partly because we as people, I grew up in a family of 12, and they often say to people, we knew we weren't going to have summer holidays, summer vacations in the sense of going anywhere. We knew why, because there were 12 of us in the family. We couldn't afford to go anywhere. But we used to be a bit jealous, I'd have to admit, about our towny cousins and others who'd come to the community in the summertime. And we'd be kind of jealous because they were on vacation. And it was interesting to us, and it's only later that I've wondered now who was worse off, people who couldn't afford to go anywhere on vacation, or people who come and stay with people who couldn't afford to go anywhere on vacation. But with that said and done, the fun would come when you try to get your towny cousin down into the dory, and they'd step on the side of the dory, and of course the dory would tip out, as we'd all know, and then eventually, after you get them to let go of the wharf, they'd feel the dory tip and they'd leap to the other side. And then what would they do? Of course, they'd leap back and forth over and over and over again. Well, that image often comes to my mind because I think it reflects not only what Tony does getting in a dory, but more so what we do instinctively as human beings, and that is when we find that we're not in balance, when we find that things are at a kilter in our lives, we might say, we tend to probably extend too far in the opposite direction. We kind of overdo it, we might say, and that then starts to become part of the dynamic that even makes us more unsettled in life. And as we move through the session today, there'll be different thoughts and ideas and themes that'll come to mind And part of it is trying to narrow in that range in which we bounce back and forth, we might say, when we are trying to achieve balance in our lives. So that's kind of a bit of the context or the background to the theme of clergy wellness that I want to kind of bring to it. What I want to do is take a few moments at the outset of it to say, what's in the balance? What's in the balance for people in ministry? What are the things that they have to try and I suppose get a harness on or get some control over so that they can manage the activities and the balance in their own lives? So just a way of kind of thinking of this. Your lives are very full. I know every one of you are, and to be able to attend this today, it was probably for some of you God sent that there's a storm, because you would probably have other things in your schedule, and if you didn't, others certainly had other things in their schedule for you. So you're probably attending today because of the weather, or you're probably watching this at a time in your office or at home, or listening to it at least, when you have dozens of other things that you might even be trying to do at the same time. But blessings for trying to engage with it. So how I want to go about this is to imagine that you're kind of walking around a shack. You come upon a shack in the woods, and imagine in that shack is everything that makes up your life. So you look at the shack as a small one-room place, and it has a window on each side. So the first window that you'll gaze through, we might call it the window of attachments. What are the attachments that you have in your life? Because these are the things that have to be balanced. It's an old saying, if you try to be all to all, you'll wind up being nothing to no one. And so we all have all kinds of attachments, as I say, at home and beyond. Think of all of the things that you were attached to one way or another, by choice or circumstance, at work, through your ministry, through volunteerism, things you're doing with your family, the things you're doing in the creative things, in your work placement, in a parish or other type of work, in your ministry to sacramental and preaching and care of the sick, and then the administrative tasks on top of it. And then you try and pitch in with other things as well, one way and another. Either organized things that you're volunteering as part of, or things that are going on that you just like to give a lift at. So that's one way of kind of looking at what are the things that are going on in life. The other next window you can kind of gaze through are the, might call them the attachments through choice or circumstance. You know, there's some things that we're part of when you're looking in at that bundle of things that are in your life. There's some things that we are part of because we have some choice over it. We can choose how much we're going to be involved. We can choose what we're going to do, how much we're going to do, how much time and effort and energy and money and other things we're going to dedicate to it. But there are oodles and oodles of other things that, yeah, in theory you might be able to say you can choose not to do that. But in practice, considering who you are as a spouse, maybe as a parent, as a child of elderly parents, maybe as a sibling, as a friend, as a neighbor, and especially as a pastor and a person in ministry, there are things that people might be able to say, oh yeah, you know, well, that's your own choice. But in reality, you know, it isn't. So that's another way of gazing upon what do I have to balance. Another significant factor in that you can look upon through another window is to see that bundle of things that are part of your life in light of the flow of positive and negative. Some things in our lives bring positive experience. They're joyful. They're worthwhile. They're rehabilitating and rejuvenating to ourselves, to our minds, to our bodies, to our souls, and what have you. Well, some things are very negative. I would think, I not only think it because I've thought it up on my own, but also from research, people in ministry tend to put the things that are positive experiences in their lives further down on the list of priorities than the things that are more draining. And you don't need to be any genius to know what happens then. That when we continue to load up on the negative things, give all of our time and effort to the things that are draining rather than the things that are going to give us life and energy, it won't be long and we will be very, very drained. And another gaze that can be helpful for us is to look at the things that are going on in our lives through the window of issues that we deal with and issues that we don't deal with. issues that we deal with and issues that we don't deal with. Because most times when people get to a point where they're experiencing a big problem in their life and they start to get some help with it, most times when they start to get the help and start to give the history of what has become a big problem, they can trace it back to a time when it really wasn't a big problem. It kind of started out as a small problem, and many would admit that the reason why they didn't deal with it is because it seemed to be a small problem or seemed to be just a little hassle, and they didn't want to be considered to be childish or picky or whatever the case might be. And so it might be an interpersonal problem, it might be one thing or another is going on in their life one way or another, and they don't deal with it adequately, either by getting more information about it or dealing with a conflict or clarifying an issue or what have you. And then it almost becomes a habit to have that as part of your life, but like any infection might do, it continues to get worse and worse and worse. So those are some of the ways of gazing on, the issues that need to be balanced. One of the important factors in trying to find balance in our lives is that great gift of courage. We'll have John courage later, but now I'm talking about the other virtue. John is virtue. Virtue of courage. Years ago, I took my children to the old movie, The Prince's Diary. It was kind of an interesting show, especially for the youngsters. It was about a young one who was being identified as the heir apparent in this fictitious country. To make the long story short, she had to eventually make the choice about whether or not she wanted to become queen or not. Her father would have been the heir to the throne, but he was dead. So on the night that she went to the fancy ball like Cinderella and was supposed to decide and announce her intention, she just couldn't cope with it. She took off and she raced back to the place they were staying, and lo and behold, when she got there, she found her cat sitting on the middle of the floor, and the cat was sitting on an envelope. Now, I don't know how that happened. It wouldn't happen in real life, but Hollywood makes it happen. And lo and behold, in the envelope was a letter from her father who was dead. And he spoke to her, not to tell her what to do, whether she should, identify herself as the heir to the throne and what have you. But he simply spoke of the type of situation that she might eventually find herself in, the very situation she's in now, and he spoke of it in terms of courage. And he said, courage is not absence of fear. Courage is believing in something that is more important than that which is feared. I think that's a good thought and idea for us to hold in mind as we start to gaze upon things in our lives that might be a bit out of balance, and particularly as we start to look at issues that we might need to deal with, issues that are draining on us and straining on us, and start to ponder a little bit, well, what do I need to do to be able to make this change? Courage is one of the things that is important to it. It's important we bear in mind how courage works. It's not always, as this quote from Mary Ann Radmacher says, she says, courage does not always roar. Courage sometimes is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, I'll try again tomorrow. I think those two quotes about courage put a very good description to the resilience, maybe, that we need to be able to deal with matters that can be drawing us off balance and causing us to be distressed. Courage alone is not enough to make the right choices, because we have to have values, and values are an important aspect of in being able to decide what would be the right balance in my life, and what would be the best way to go about making changes that I need to make, so that I make changes in ways that won't cause me or others more harm than good. My point to it is that courage and values give us the balance we need, the balance in perspective that we need to do the right things and to do things right. Because as we start to pursue making changes, trying to find balance in our lives, deal with things that need to be dealt with, it's important that we have a good sense of what would be the right thing for me to do here, but how do I do it right so that I don't just kind of replace one matter that's a problem with another. On a stormy winter morning like this, when we're not even yet into winter, but it's Newfoundland for us, it's refreshing for me to look at my sailboat. It's a picture on a Labor Day morning a few years ago, and a beautiful morning. Many times on a morning or an evening when it's really calm in St. Joseph's and Mary's Bay, people drive along the road and take a picture. And I'm sure they're thinking it looks so balanced. Indeed it does look so balanced in many ways. But pretty well every day in St. Joseph's that calm is disturbed by the breeze that usually picks up by 9:30 or 10 o'clock, certainly by 11 o'clock. My wife says she likes to go sailing as long as there's no wind. I'm not sure how that works, but pretty well any time that I'm going and it's a nice calm morning, and I'll say to her, this would be a good day for you to come sailing with me. There's no wind. And she'll say, yeah, I think I'll go. Well, inevitably, within half an hour, there's a bit of a breeze coming up. And after a while, I'll say, I think I'll haul up the sails now. And then the breeze will probably get a bit worse, and sometimes a lot worse than even it is on that one. And maybe the person who took the picture in the morning could see this type of a picture later in the day when I'm coming back across the bay and there's the rail is in the water, or maybe it's even underwater. Maybe my wife is saying, get me out of here, you fool, we're going to be drowned. The photographer might be thinking, wow, she's not very balanced now, is she? Speaking of the boat, I'm sure, not my wife. But the point that I want to make is that, you know, when a boat is leaning out like that, it is balanced. And that's the way it is with life as well. Life is not about everything being static all the time or sitting still and what have you. Just as a sailboat, as some of the posters would say, the sailboat is not built to hang on a mooring. It's built to go in the wind, to make your voyage, to go where you got to go. And that's the way it is for most of us most of the time. We do have stresses and strains and what have you, but it's how we manage those things that make the difference. How we manage them to get to where it is that we want to go. And so I want to make it clear that when we're talking about balance in life, it's not about never having any problems or issues or challenges. In fact, I doubt any person in ministry would want their life to be in a situation or to be ministering in a situation where there are no challenges or no issues to be dealt with. That would not be fulfilling, and I doubt people would recognize that as how they're responding to their vocational call. Most want to be taking on the issues that need to be dealt with to bring about the kingdom. So that will always bring challenges, but it's how we handle them and what skill set we have and what how well fortified we are to be able to keep ourselves in trim, we might say, so that as the stresses and strains come, that we're able to maintain the healthy balance and within the range of a healthy balance so that we can do what needs to be done. So what I am laying out is my 4 pillars on which we might build a balanced life. And the first pillar that I'll bring forward is self-care. The first way to care for others is to care for yourself. The first way to care for others is to care for yourself. And every one of you who are listening to this morning have heard that before, and you know it. But the question is, do you really believe it? So what is self-care? It's a desire to value myself as my Heavenly Father values me. That's how it's described in this book by Adele Alberg Calhoun. The book is called Spiritual Disciplines Handbook. Beautiful text. I used it in a course we had this year at Queen's College in spirituality. There's a section in it on spiritual care. So if we desire spiritual care, if we desire self-care in a spiritual context, I should say, we're desiring to value ourselves as God values us. A simple definition of self-care is that it honors God by nurturing and protecting the limits and desires of the body, mind, and spirit. honors God by nurturing and protecting the limits and desires of the body, mind, and spirit. I'm just going to ask you to take a few moments in quiet now, just to ponder this. When you take in those few moments, time to consider, what are my obstacles to self-care? Ask yourself, what obstacles do you yourself have to self-care? What are the particular challenges to self-care that you face for yourself, that you see for yourself? Sometimes when I'm doing presentations with people, I suggest they imagine they have a notebook in their mind, or you might have a real notebook in front of you. But either way, jot one thing that you will start doing to care for yourself. When we were youngsters, my father used to, I think he had a bit of an insight to this without talking about it as self-care, but he'd often say the two most important things you'll buy for yourself are good shoes and a good bed. When you're not in one, you're in the other. I think in a way he appreciated the fact that if you don't do things to look after yourself, you're not going to be able to do much for others as well. I'd ask Father John Courage to bring forward some of his thoughts and ideas. And thank you, John, for agreeing to participate with me today. And if you want to turn on your webcam, if you can get to do that.
Let's see.
I'll bring forward your slides for you anyway, John.
Okay.
There.
Can you hear me, Rick?
Yeah, okay. I'll get you to speak a little bit closer to your microphone.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll bring forward your slides.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Here we go. For me personally, and just talking to some of the crowd that I work with, this presentation is not just my own. It's collaborative. But we talked about looking after ourselves physically first. You know that we need to exercise, and that's common sense. And whether you got a home gym or you go to the local gym, and sometimes it's something as simple as just walking. I'm not a gym person. Never was, never will be. I don't do aerobics or anything like that. But I enjoy a good walk. And it's something that's mentally cleansing for me as well as physically helpful. The second thing is healthy eating choices. And that's working here, we hear that all the time. And so it's something easy to throw in the microwave and cook, but that you can't live on a salad either all the time. And you need to treat yourself and go and have something that's a nice juicy steak if that's what you want. But you know, there's eating choices that you make. Days off physically are so important. We're all meant to have days off. And off means off. And that means not working at your job or doing something. And like most of the clergy I know, we fall into a rut of working like we're like robots. I'm sad to say, but that I wore working like a robot like a badge of honor, and it isn't. Something else in this day and age, I think, talking about days off, is to get yourself off the grid. And if you've got an answering machine or whatever it is that takes messages, let that do it. And don't open it. Just take your day off, your emails, your texts. Just try it. It's amazing when you take yourself off the grid. And I'm beginning to become more and more convinced that so-called necessary electronic devices are addictions as opposed to aids these days. Regularly seeing a doctor is important, and I've got a wonderful doctor who expects me to see him every 6 months. And I know he gets paid for it, but he just wants to keep a check on my blood pressure and things like that. But I was talking to a fellow priest just the other day, and we started talking about the weight loss that I've just had. And he said, at the end of the conversation, he said, you know, Courage, he said, we don't have a family doctor. And I said, how come? And he said, because we move all the time. And I just said, well, I know every time we move, the current family doctor that we had would refer us to another. My only suggestion for that is that I know it's not easy in rural Newfoundland, but we tried always not to have the doctor in the community in which we lived. And not because I didn't like the doctor, but because if you had to go sit in a waiting room, by the time you walked over the front door to the time you walked back out, the local people would have had you dead and buried. So that's something you need to take in some consideration. And to get some proper rest. I'm a lousy sleeper, but I know how to take one good nap, I tell you. And it's probably 15 minutes, and it's probably with the remote in my hand in front of the television watching supper time news. But that power snooze is as good as a wonderful meal. But you need your rest, and you need to find ways to do that. So that's how I think you can look after yourself physically. And there's lots of others that you can come up with yourselves. Secondly is mentally, and that's knowing your role. Living in a clergy house, a rectory, or whatever it is, even we don't live in a rectory anymore, but the people around me know that I'm a member of the clergy. And it's like living in a glass bowl. So it's not always easy to live in that glass bowl because people see everything. But I think if you set some boundaries, first to know that you are in a parish for a relatively short time. My ministry, parish ministry, was about a 5-year stint each time. And people very quickly want to make sure that you're on their side, to make sure you know something about somebody else. And I'm telling you, you can't be everybody's buddy, that you need moderate distance without appearing aloof. And a good rule of thumb that I've used is to try and treat everyone the same, whether it was the local merchant or the chronic complainer. The chronic complainer is probably the harder one, but you know where you stand. The local merchant, maybe not always. We're not judge and jury. Rick has already just mentioned, talking about your struggles and your achievements. I think we need to know what we don't know. So know what you do not know. It saves a lot of pressure and stress. Lay people can do a lot as well, sometimes even better than we can. So we're meant to foster and mentor and not take over. In some of the struggles, you need to talk it out. I don't think it's healthy to take a good conversation about parish life to a parishioner. But in rural Newfoundland, as well as here in the cities, public health nurses, the RCMP, a school principal, I found to be helpful people because they're in the community too, and they have their struggles. And you'll be surprised as you start to share with them some of the struggles that you have, that they'll share with you some of their struggles. And it's a mini support group in so many ways. Another struggle, I think, is clericalism. Nobody's indispensable, not even a priest. But because we say we've got a call or a vocation to ministry, right away people think that you're above them. But we need to be cautious because if they put you on a pedestal, you know what happens when things are on a pedestal. There's a great risk of a bad fall. Workaholism is also a sense of what we do. We've got to keep going. Everybody got to see that we're working. We've got to be seen to be doing stuff. That's not healthy either, I don't think. That's a struggle. And you need a sense of humor. And there's humor in everything. I remember one time that there was a death in the community, and the funeral home was not in the community that I lived in. And so we were waiting for the hearse to come. Wasn't coming, it was coming. And we were all starting to get a little anxious. And the family were there, and you could see everybody in the church, and we were probably running 10 minutes late then. When somebody in the family, one of the boys came and he said, "Don't worry, sir. Dad's always late. He was late for his wedding. He'll be late for his funeral." And they could find the humor in it. And sometimes we just need to find the humor in what's going on. Achievements. I think we need to have a healthy pride because we're worth it. To reflect on situations to see what went well and what didn't and what you learned. And so if you have a really good Bible study, or if you have a really good ability to sing or whatever, those are achievements. And be able to separate the negative comments from personal attacks. There's always something behind a negative comment. And I think for those of us who've been in parish ministry for a long time, we can start to identify that. And that's because somebody might have refused a baptism, or somebody wouldn't allow a particular song at a funeral. And so they're holding a grudge. And all of a sudden, there's your face, and you become the victim. And they lash out at you. And it's not you so much as what happened. And there's hurt. And that's real. So you need to be open to recognizing that people's anger is not always directed right at us. Sometimes we deserve it, but other times it's something that we need to sit out and let them vent, and then sit down and have a cup of tea and talk it over. And finally, just some hobbies. And I enjoy reading, and I don't read religious books. I like Victorian murder mysteries, and they just put me in a different time and place. There's no technology. It's all done by human eyes. People like Sherlock Holmes, those things. Somebody once said, "Courage, why don't you do something you're not good at?" And I said, "Like what?" And he said, "You should do something with your garden." Well, I'm not a good gardener, but that I've started to plant flowers, and by the end of the summer, I'm very proud of what I can do. And for those of you who got a workshop, maybe sometimes you just need to organize and make sure that things are done so that you can look after it. Emotionally, this is the one that I think as clergy and as from my own personal experience, that we really need to spend more time at. That I've been married 35 years now, so my wife deserves a chest full of medals, but that we need to build our relationships with our partner. Just because we work for God doesn't mean we should ignore the partner and our family, because that's all we got. Back in my days at the Atlantic School of Theology, I did a Sunday placement at St. Matthias Parish, and George Ebsry was the rector at the time, and I knew George fairly well. I got to know his family well. The youngest son of two became a friend. And I remember one day towards the end of my internship there, he sat me down in his living room. We just finished Sunday dinner. We always had Sunday dinner. And he said words to the effect, "John, don't ever forget your family, and don't make them second. We're all that Dad got, and he doesn't see it." I admit that I've not been very good at that, because in my time, in the training that I had, it was your church came first, not even God. The church came first. And it took me a personal experience in a parish to realize that I lived in a glass house, and that our partners and our children are scrutinized as much as we are. So our daughter came home one day, and she wasn't herself. And she just didn't want to talk. She wasn't wanting to eat. Something had happened in school, and we couldn't figure it out. Checked with the school. They didn't know what happened. Finally, she talked to her mother. And another child saw Charlotte doing something, and that child said, "You're the minister's daughter. You're not allowed to do that." And he was going to tell. And she was frightened to death. Our children are important to us. We got to look after them, especially when they get into those teenage years. They have to have the base that we give them. Our partners are not curates. But unfortunately, in many places, people think they're the unpaid curate. My wife played the piano. And so in the first two parishes that we went to, she was expected to be the organist. She wouldn't. She'd fill in if she was needed. She was expected to be the ACW president, and she never was. They wanted her to be a Sunday school teacher. She didn't do that either. Sell tickets. Didn't do that. Tell you what we did with those tickets. We bought them ourselves. And the list goes on. Relationships need work, and clergy families, we need to work together. As I just said, Heather and I are married 35 years now. And long before the phrase was popular, we always, except for the first parish, we couldn't do it because there wasn't an opportunity. It was an isolated community in Labrador. We always went out once a week to a local restaurant. People call it date night nowadays. But we'd go to a movie, or we'd sit home, we'd clear off the dining room table and do a puzzle. We'd sit and watch television. And while I don't enjoy all the things she does, she doesn't enjoy everything that I do, we'd make time to be together, to talk. Our friends, they're priceless, they're necessary, and they're rewarding. A true friend will like you despite what you are, and will give you that good kick in the butt that you needed. And I'll tell you, there's times I needed a good kick in the butt, and I had good friends to do it for me. I think it's important that we do things that we like. This time of year, Heather and I will drive all the way to Portagrave just to see the boats lit up in the harbour, just to get away. Our parishioners, you learn to trust some of them, that you can bounce ideas off of, to get some honest advice or suggestions, and to ask. Don't be afraid to ask. Tell me what was good today, or what wasn't, or what should be changed. And they may never be your friends, but an asset to ministry they are. And finally, your colleagues. And that's one of the gifts that you have when you're at Queen's, or whether you're, as we did at Atlantic School of Theology, and we're still in touch with a number of people. So or in your archdeaconry or ministry, you won't be close to everybody, but there's some you click with, and they become lifelong friends and confidants. And they're assets, they're helpful, and very much necessary. So we can look after ourselves as well, spiritually. That would be the next slide, I think, Rick. Yeah. Something that I found helpful, and helpful when I was doing some spiritual direction for some people, was to encourage them to set aside a sacred space and a time, and just to go, and it can be in your living room, it can be in your study, it can be in your TV room, but just to set aside a little space where this is your chair, and where you got some of your books or whatever it is you want to do, and so that you can start a quiet time. I found it helpful to light a candle, and that was my signal that we were about to start. And when my time was over, I blew out the candle and I could start to do whatever else it was I had to do. Prayer and meditation are so rich. And over the years, I've gone to many retreats, and they've been led by religious communities. And primarily, I spent some time with the Cowley Fathers in Bracebridge when they were there. But in more recent years, it's been with the Sisters of the Church in both Oakville and in Ham Common in England. And they're excellent. There's individuals as well locally. I've gone to the Presentation House down in Virginia Waters. I've gone to the Mercy Convent in Littledale just to get away. And you'd be surprised how important it is to take a good book, to meditate, to read words that you don't often get a chance. And I become like a sponge. Nature is so rich. The south bank of Bowring Park, just going for that walk amongst the trees and watching the river, that's where I can do some of my best prayers and meditating. I enjoy music. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. But there's also something I've rediscovered, and that's classical music. And I give Heather credit for that. Heather would turn on the CD in the morning in the kitchen when she was getting her breakfast ready, and she would just turn on some quiet classical music, and she was still doing dishes supper time. And it was soothing. And so there's sacred hymns, and there's all those things, but that music is important. I enjoy, the BBC has choral evensong, the Compline Choir in Seattle, Washington. And that's my spirituality. That may not be yours, but there's something there. And your spirituality changes and evolves. Scripture. We all know familiar verses of Scripture. And if I asked you to start the 23rd Psalm with me, you'd say it. We'd start at the very beginning and go right to the very end. But we'd be saying words. And sometimes you need to slow down and breathe and just reconnect with God and not just say words. I think sometimes it's good to have a different version. It challenges you then because it's different words that say the same thing, but it makes you stop and work it through. Here at the Health Sciences, recently, pause was introduced into the ICU. And it was seen as a need because we've had a number of long-term patients there. And they were there probably months and sometimes even longer than that. And that the struggle was when they died, they had become part of family in some sense. And so it was deemed that after a death had occurred and family had gone away, whoever looked after that patient could they would gather around, they pull the curtain around, and it wasn't a formal thing. You just went in and very quietly you were given the opportunity to share a memory or a story or something, just to pause after what's been a long, hard journey. And I thought, we could do that too. We could pause. You know, if you've had a rough funeral to do, or if you've had a horrible meeting, to just sit back and pause and name what's gone on. And that's very scriptural, I think, to name it so that we can recharge our batteries instead of letting ourselves get drained. And that something I think that's also very important is to recognize Jesus did that. Jesus stepped aside. Jesus paused from the busyness of life so that he could have a sacred space. And his sacred space was not a comfortable chair, but somewhere maybe in a desert or somewhere in the garden, but just away so he could pray and meditate. So those are some of the things I think in spirituality that we could look after. And finally, I'd like just to finish with a quick little story. And that those of you who are ancient as I am, I'm 35 years a priest next week, that we brought down Archbishop Hanbridge, and he was the Metropolitan. And we had a clergy weekend at Bury Heights. That was before Lavrock. And the Archbishop was so interesting, and he took the time and he went through all the things that happens in clergy lives. And he said wonderful things. And we all took notes, and I took many, many notes. And to me, he was spot on. I said, geez, I said, where's this man to when I need him all the time? But when I got home, the notebook that I had, I poked it in the shelf, and after a long time, I suppose, or not even a long time, those notes just became notes. They became words on a page, and I did nothing with it. But in hindsight's 2020, what the Archbishop had to say, he said to me, he said to all of us, but to me, he was talking to me, and at the time, I didn't know it as well as I know it now. And I wish many times that I kept those notes and I kept the words that he wrote more closer to me. So for those of you who are taking notes, don't put your book or your sheets away. Take them to one side and refer back to them. Rick has done a number of these kinds of educational events for us here at the Health Sciences when he was the director. And I've kept, I'm amazed at what I kept, and that so that I can refer back. And it's well worth it to keep your notes, keep them handy, and refer back to them. And look after yourself. If you can't do anything else, look after yourself, because if you look after yourself, you look after others equally as well. Thanks, Rick.
Well, thank you, John. That was awesome. So thoroughly covered the topics, all the aspects and dimensions of life for the person. And right now I'd like to throw it open while your comments are fresh and so relevant, and see if anyone has any questions or comments. Folks, if you do, you can please turn on your microphone so you can ask John a question and or make a comment. Anyone with any comments or questions? One of the things that I'm going to bring up just while people are getting up to mojo, if they want to ask a comment or question, and you can type it in, incidentally, in that chat button on the GoToMeeting dialogue boxes, and if you have a question, you can type it in and I'll ask it, John, for you. But a little tool I've created and used over the years with people in different contexts, either in my work at the college and particularly in my time in counseling. I created a little one-pager called Personal Growth Plan. And it really focuses on the same themes as John did in his presentation, but the aspect that I built into it is a bit of accountability. And this is why we decided to have this session now on in December, because it's not uncommon that people look at the new year and see it's a time maybe I'd make some changes and what have you, New Year's resolutions and all. So I simply broke this down into the various aspects, physical, the kinds of things that John just mentioned. I included the intellectual component as well, because I think as professionals, having, being committed to learning and study and dealing with issues that we can't get answers to, and that is a big challenge to people in ministry today, where we're so science driven and what have you, and you're dealing with issues that are faith based and trying to get that balance, and particularly some of the big issues that come forward in the church today that are controversial and what have you. They deserve some time of study and investigation so that we can feel on a solid ground in order to be able to have the balance that we need within ourselves to respond to others socially. How we are in our relationships with others, family, friends, all the things that John mentioned. Emotional. How do we manage our feelings? How do we deal with the strong negative feelings, things such as anger, or resentment, or jealousy, or disturbing memories, and those kinds of things? We'll touch on that a little bit later in the presentation. And spirituality, and John dealt with those so well and what have you. So what this little personal growth plan is set out to so that you can identify, and I always suggest people pick one thing. Don't do like the Tony getting in the dory and, decide to do so much that you'll do nothing when it's all said and done. A week into it, you have yourself overwhelmed. But pick one thing. One thing maybe in one or two or three of the components. Even you don't need to do something in all of them at once, but pick the thing that's going to probably make most difference for you and or others. And then decide, for instance, if you're going to decide, you know what, I know that I've been months, years saying I got to take off weight. Well, what am I going to do to make that happen? I'm going to start taking a walk 4 or 5 times a week, whatever, for a half an hour. And I'm going to do that for a month. And then I'm going to look at it again and see what I want to do. Socially, there's someone that I'm connected to, but I feel a bit embarrassed that I've kind of drifted apart, or there was something said or done or not said or done, and we've kind of let it become a wedge, and wedges only work in deeper and deeper. So what am I going to do about that? And so on in any sphere. So the idea of having a personal growth plan is that you'll actually set a date that you're going to start, January 1st or 2nd or whatever it is. Then I'm going to review that after 2 weeks or after a month. See, how am I doing it? And then I'm going to share it with someone. I'm going to pick some person, a close colleague, a spiritual director, my spouse, or a sibling, or someone that I can trust, that I'm going to say, look, I've decided to do this, and I want to share with you that this is my plan, so that if I achieve it, you will know, and you can help me to do more if I need to, and you can affirm me in it. But if I don't, that you can help me figure out why I'm not able to stick with it. And you just sign it, not because it's a legal document or anything, but just to kind of make it something that's genuine and that you're committed. Simple little tool, but actually research shows that when people take the effort to move things out of their mind into actually doing something concrete, that they have better success with it. Folks, I'm going to see if anyone has any questions or comments for Father John on his great presentation and sharing on it. I know somebody has typed in, a few people have typed in things here, so I'm just going to scroll through them. And if anyone wants to turn on their microphone and ask John a question while I'm at this. Some have asked if they can get a copy of the personal growth plan sheet that I use. By all means. Yeah, great. One asks here, Father John, if you'd comment on how you experience personal growth and wellness now as compared to the early years of your ministry.
There was no health in my early ministry. I went through seminary in 1979, and clergy wellness, that wasn't part of the conversation at all. This is what we did. We went to seminary. We didn't have any of the opportunities that we have nowadays. We sat, we were told, and we were trained for parish ministry only, and that was it. There was nothing. And it wasn't until you got into parish ministry that you realized that I can't do everything. And I think in more recent time, I've certainly learned to try and look after myself better. I've learned, because I had bad experiences, that I need to look after my personal being well, but I need to look after my family well. And one of the greatest gifts I have is I've got a daughter who will say, "Dad, you're full of it," and without any malice, and so it keeps me in track. I've got a wife, we all have spouses, and without any malice, just say, "Look, you had a bad day today. You don't have to bring it home," right? So we need to settle down and talk out what happened. And so time has changed from when I was supposed to be the rock to where I become a sponge and I can soak some of this in. And I think that's where I've come to in the time of my ministry, that particularly the last 20 years in chaplaincy, just about, I've come to realize more and more the value of looking after myself and being well, and not just being physically well, but spiritually, intellectually, and emotionally. Those are things that I needed, and I had to find ways. I could name it, I just couldn't find the ways, but when I found the ways, I think I've been much better at it.
John, another person simply comments that they're concerned with that clergy are often not supportive of each other. And any thoughts on anything that might be done to improve that?
I agree that we aren't. I think for so many years, if one parish was running a really good Bible study, in my day, it was, I'll say Alpha. I don't know how much that's on the go now, but Alpha. And if one parish was doing it, then I had to do it. Where instead of being able to share, okay, you do the Alpha and I'll do something else, and let people come together. I think we don't trust each other very well. Those of you that are out there would say that. And that's why it's important to have somebody that you're a colleague with, and I got people that I work with here that I would consider very close friends, and we spend some social times together. And they don't always have to be Anglicans, boys. I'll tell you now. Find somebody who supports you, and it's so helpful. And I don't know what the church can do to do that, because sometimes we tend to be lone rangers, and that's not healthy either. But a number of years ago, we used to have retreats and things. Some of those things have kind of slipped away. But to have a clergy day, sit down, have a meal, talk to people you don't see very often anymore, what's going on, find out what's going on in their lives, and they might ask about yours too. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it's true. We're not good at supporting each other very well, and so you got to do your work and find somebody you can trust.
Great, thanks, John. Any other comment or observation, John, or anyone with comments from their own experience that they'd want to share with the group?
This is Madonna here. I don't know if you can hear me or not. Can you?
Yes, we can hear you, Madonna. Thank you. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, I listening to your what's it called, conference this morning anyway, and John's message just now talking about notes, going back to notes. I attended a pastoral care conference probably 5 years ago, I guess, in Gander, and I still got a couple notes in my handbag that I carry around with me, and I do get them out from time to time because there's a beautiful verse, and they said, like, as we're walking down like a hospital room, like sometimes we gotta keep in mind the big picture. And this verse on my notes that from Romans, right? Nothing can separate us from the love of God in Jesus Christ. And every now and then I get these notes out, and that always comes in my mind, and it was a beautiful verse, right? And also in John, just talking there now, how we don't trust one another, and that's right. And we need to have ministry friends in other denominations as well, because like Jesus gave us the command that we should love one another, respect one another, and have that trust. I'm enjoying your conference. A lot of things I've heard before, but still beautiful to renew it all. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Madonna. Thank you. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, thanks, John. I'll get you to comment again on the before we close off. So we've mentioned that 4 pillars. First one is self-care, and the second theme that I want to bring to it is teamwork. No one is an island. And you know, if it's one of the major challenges to people in ministry is being able to work well with others. Already we've touched on, and a few have mentioned it, Father John did, and Madonna did as well, that you know, how we work with others is so important, and whether or not we use that as a resource to strengthen what we're doing. The beautiful old poem by John Donne, of course, prior to politically correct language. He said, no man is an island. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a cloud be washed away by the sea, Europe is less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thine friends, or if thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. The beautiful poem, of course, is often quoted, particularly to bring reference to how we're connected to each other. But in ministry, it's so important to be aware of being part of teams and a multiplicity of teams. And a few fast facts, as I'd call them, about teams, is that all teams have leaders. No such thing as talking about a team without a leader. All teams will have a leader. And there are 2 types of leaders. There are the formal leaders, the person who has the title and the authority and the job description, or whatever the case might be. But there are also the informal leaders. And they're the people who have the influence. And they may well be the formal leader, but the informal leader is the one who will try to influence people to pursue the goal they have in mind. Every team must have a vision. No sense in saying we're a team if we don't know what we're working towards, what we want to accomplish, what we want to make happen or have had made happen by the time we disperse as a team. So there has to be a shared vision, and that can either be the formal vision of what it is that we want to do to build a building, or bring about the kingdom of God, or to pay off a debt, or to evangelize, make people come to know Jesus Christ. But there can also be an informal vision that comes about, and sometimes what happens within teams, within groups, is that there can be an informal leader who influences people towards an informal vision. So in spite of the fact that the group, the team, the committee, call it what you will, task force, work group, come together to do things and they say we're doing for this, that, or the other thing, we've all been part of groups where, unbeknownst to us, there's a bit of a movement starts and eventually it becomes quite clear, quite known to us, because there's conflict sometimes as some members start to drift away towards a different goal and trying to accomplish something different. So the real vision, hopefully and typically and formally, would be very positive, what we want to make happen, wonderful things. But the real vision can become very negative. There can be a hostility from somebody, and so they're wanting nothing good to happen except to cause embarrassment or hurt or shut down or slow down to what the formal leader might be trying to accomplish. And those are very real dynamics in most organizations. Another fast fact is that members need each other. Members of the team need each other. And they must support each other. A team cannot function if people don't recognize the need for each and every other member of the team, and if they're not willing to do what they can to support each other to accomplish their respective roles in it. Very important concept for people who are in leadership roles to understand is that we often use the term team as if it always means the same thing, but it doesn't. Well, it does in the general sense that teams have leaders and people have to work together in that. But we speak of being team players and accomplishing things as a team and doing teamwork as if every team will function the same or if it's always the same type of team. And as I say, it is. There are mainly 3 different types of teams. And team leaders particularly ought to be aware that what type of team do we need to be in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish. Because if we just go about thinking that we're going to be a team, some people on the team might think, well, that means that we all have the same amount of power and the same amount of authority, and we all have a say about everything that's going to happen here. Whereas some teams can't function that way. We see that in parishes, we see it in dioceses, I see it today in Queen's College in my role there. I saw it when I was in Eastern Health as a member of a team where I was a leader in the pastoral care and ethics team, but I was a member of the broader leadership team that was led by the executive director and what have you. So sometimes people have the notion of team, and they will say, we're really not playing as a team, they might say, or they might say that, we're not team players, or there's not good teamwork. And sometimes it's actually that there's differences of opinions of what type of team we are. Put in simple terms, the teams are reciprocal, dispersed, and sequential type teams. Probably the easiest way, without belaboring the point, is to use sports, as which is where most people take their notion of team and teamwork from. Different types of sports require different types of teamwork. Reciprocal team is what we'd see, for instance, in hockey and in basketball, where depending on where the puck is, the players on the ice, the players on the court will take their position and play their role based on where the puck is. But they're constantly, everyone is always in motion, everyone is always adjusting what they're doing because of what others are doing with regard to the ball or to the puck. Some types of teams are that way when we're trying to accomplish things in groups, in congregations or communities or what have you. But that's not always the way. Another type of team is the dispersed team, I should say, in sports, in baseball and softball and what have you. But the point and features of dispersed team is that people have their different roles, their different expertise, and they go and they do it. They don't need to everyone be clustered around together. In fact, they need not to be. They need to be off doing what they do well. Little children, when they're playing soccer or softball, they'll all crowd around the ball and there's no playing positions and what have you. But as they get older and become more aware that what this is really about is scoring goals and preventing the other team from scoring, they start to take up their positions. They start to play it well. So when the ball is hit, they don't all run to chase the ball. The person closest to it will try and catch it or pick it up or whatever the case might be. And so it is, and in fact that is the way that most teams need to be able to function in doing it. And within that dispersed team, team leaders have particular role and responsibility to make sure that they're designating roles and responsibilities to those with the competencies to do it, but also that people are shown appreciation for what they're doing, and that the leader exercise their duty and their role and their authority to make the decisions that they need to make in their role. Sequential teams are more like football, where people in small groups or individually have particular roles and responsibility, and everyone does it in turn. One group does what they need to do, and they pass it along to the next group or individual, and it gets passed along. Of course, part of that is that if the group ahead of you haven't done what they needed to do or ought to have done, it brings a halt to all hands. We don't need to belabor this too much at this point, because it's not the key concept, but nevertheless, very few people in ministry would say that, or would not say that how they work with others has no bearing on how they feel about themselves personally and about the worth of their ministry. I've created, from a variety of sources that I've researched on for various reasons over the years, created what I describe as 10 commandments for an enthusiastic team. I'm going to send you this stuff, by the way. Several have sent a note asking if they can have a copy of the personal growth plan that I have. Yes, by all means. I'll also send this as a separate sheet of paper, because people like to have a look at it separately. So when we do up this stuff and send out a note that we have it, there'll be a link to to this presentation, and also a copy of these 10 commandments for an enthusiastic team, and also the personal growth plan as separate attachments. But the first commandment for an enthusiastic team is to help each other be right, not wrong. Look for ways to make new ideas work, and not for reasons they won't. Just give you a chance to kind of ponder that. And every one of you can think of times and occasions that you've been part of something where new ideas were brought forward, and before they ever got a chance to see the light of day, someone jumped on them with the great insight. Oh no, that'll never work here. That was tried before. Something like it was tried before. They tried it somewhere else and didn't work. And so the good idea gets jumped on. Not only that, the person who tried to bring forward their idea this time is likely going to be a bit gun shy about bringing forward a good idea in the future. What some organizations have done, incidentally, and it really works well, is they've developed what they call a moratorium on negativity. That when they're in their meetings, when they're in their groups, when they're in their teams, and somebody has an idea, a new idea, they declare a 5-minute moratorium on negativity. Before anyone criticizes this new idea, we got to give it at least 5 minutes to see what's good in it, what would be worth trying, what feature of it might be life-giving to us. And what they often find is that by the time that 5 minutes is up, people aren't half as interested in criticizing it and condemning it, because they've given it a chance to at least sprout a little bit, and it starts to become a source of new life and things that people want to buy into. If in doubt, check it out. Don't make negative assumptions about each other. This loops right back to points that were made before about how clergy are able to support each other and engage with each other and others as well. But so often we make that mistake of making negative assumptions. Usually what that is about is somebody is doing something different or has suggested something different or what have you, and we're kind of in our minds, or maybe in conversations with others, kind of examining their motivation, doubting their authenticity, we might say. Help each other win. Take pride in each other's victories. Speak positively about each other and about your organization. You know, it's hard to inspire others in any way. I've been, for the last while, doing a little bit of work about vocational recruitment, because it's one of the challenges, of course, in the church today, and there aren't many people who have much expertise about vocational recruitment and what have you. But one of the features that is often spoken on when people have been interviewed, and young people particularly interviewed about their consideration of ministry and what have you, is the impression of what ministry is about that they get from the way that people in ministry tend to talk about the church or talk about their work or their role or being overworked and those kinds of things. All of this, of course, relates to the importance of clergy wellness, doesn't it, individually and collectively. Act with initiative and courage as if it and find ways to make things better. Act with initiative and courage and find ways to make things better. Look beyond the moment. How often we make that blunder of saying something or planning something or doing something without really looking at, well, where's this going to go? What will be the impact of this a day from now or a week from now or a month from now or a year from now? And short-sighted reacting to things really more than responding and proper planning and consideration. Whatever you want, give it away. And that's particularly true with regard to matters of substance, such as trusting others and respecting others and being flexible with others and what have you. Very rigid and disrespectful and dubious in our level of engagement with others, it's likely what's going to loop back to us as well. Whatever you want, give it away. Focus and finish. Probably one of the biggest challenges to people in organizations, whether they be church or healthcare or education or other organizations in sports and what have you, is being able to decide what we're going to do. Decide not to do too many things, but pick the top priorities that are worth doing and try to finish them. One of the biggest criticisms of many organizations by people, and is a big contributor to burnout, particularly for people in ministry, is that over and over again there are things that are undertaken and you kind of get at it with a genuine desire to make it happen. And then before you kind of get into stride with it, something else comes along that seems to be more important than the thing that you're already committed to. And nobody says, okay, well, we're going to stop doing the thing we already said was the most important and say that's not important anymore. No, we're going to continue to do that, but we're going to do this new thing as well. And then something else comes along. Sometimes people speak of it as the flavor of the month type of things. And nothing ever gets completed. Father John was here speaking about it, and I think we all have the experience of how empty life starts to become when you're steadily being refocused on things, but never getting a sense to feel that it has been accomplished. And so we never get that chance to celebrate and enjoy and appreciate things and what have you. Focus and finish. Share the vision, set priorities, share the goals, and help each other. Have something to look forward to. Not only the job-related tasks, socializing and celebrating and appreciating those types of things. So important to teams. Communicate information, not instructions. Some say make rapport more important than the report. I got this one from an old friend of mine who had been in the military. He's dead now, but he joined the forces in the war, Newfoundlander, the Royal Forces, and he stayed with it. He made a career of it. He moved up to the ranks, became high officer in the armed forces, the Royal Armed Forces. But when he retired, then he got a responsible position in a civic corporation. But I remember him saying one time that one of his biggest surprises when he returned to Civvy Street, as he called it, was that he said, in the military, you expect to be instructed, told what to do, because that's what you're doing. You're being prepared to take orders to do what the chain of command feels is the best thing to do. Very seldom are you given much background as to why you're being told it. He said his biggest surprise when he came back on Civvy Street was that it's really no different in corporations and organizations, including the church, than it was in the military. That basically you're given instructions, but really no information about why things are being decided the way they are, and so or why you're going to set this priority and what have you. And that's so important to teams, that people understand why we're setting the priorities and the visions and that's what we do in order to get people to engage with it. And the last commandment, as I would articulate it for an enthusiastic team, is to share your character with the team. Lead by example. Share your character with the team. Lead by example. And what is that character? Well, for people in ministry, it kind of loops back to this great thought by William James. He says, sow a thought and reap an action. Sow an action and reap a habit. Sow a habit and reap a character. Sow a character and reap a destiny. That is the chain of how our lives and our presence and our being and our wellness comes about. That sequence of from what we think about and how we think about things. And then how our thoughts lead us to act, and our acts become habits, and our habits become our character, and our character become our destiny. And we just continue to do things at one level and another. And I think that chain from thoughts through actions, through habits, through character, and through destiny is worth pondering sometimes, because it really loops us back to the things that Father John mentioned and we've included in his presentation as being important. Why we need to pray, why we need to take time to ponder, why we need to take time to pause, to make retreats, to talk to others, to share with others about the matters that are of concern and trouble to us. Because our thoughts will impact our actions and so on. And so what is our character? Probably a nice way to look to what our character can be and should be, what the Spirit would bring us to. That's so important in wellness for ourselves and for others, is probably most beautifully described here. That our character, if we were to look at it as Christians, particularly for people in ministry, should really be drawn out of love. How we think about it, our thoughts, how we act, how by habit we do things to show love, how our character reflect love, because our destiny is to be love in the presence of God, this world and the next. So that beautiful passage from Corinthians that we know, I don't need to read it all, but as I say, sometimes when I'm doing presentations like this in public forums, I say whether you take this as the inspired word of God, as I do as a Christian, or whether we take it simply as poetry, it's still powerful, and I think it still gives good description of who and what we can be if we make efforts to care, respond by loving. Probably a way to challenge ourselves with it, and I'm sure you've all come across this one way or another, is to, we might say, fill in the blank, make it our own. When we do it this way, I think it's a way of saying, is my character reflective of what my vocation would call me to be? And what in my heart of hearts I know that God is calling me to be? Can I honestly say, filling in the blank about myself, that I am patient, I am kind, I do not envy, I do not boast, I do not proud, and move on? This short passage from 1 Corinthians can be a real powerful examination of conscience, examination of our own character, we might say. Examination of whether or not I'm fully disposed to being well. Because as we would try to live this out, we would likely be inspired to do what we need to do to have wellness for ourselves and for the sake of others. I would at another time, if we had more time, but I won't belabor it now, allow for some time. Well, maybe I will. Just bring up those commandments and just scroll them out on the screen and allow you to look at them for a moment. And then if anyone has a particular thought or idea or comment, be glad to hear it. I'll just give you a few moments. Anyone want to make a comment on those thoughts and ideas? I suspect most of you could probably put something somewhat similar if we were in an activity somewhere and I gave you a pen and paper and said, here, jot down commandments for teamwork. You'd probably come up with things that are pretty similar. But any thought coming to mind that you'd like to share with others or observation?
Hello, Rick.
Yes?
Linda Budden here.
Linda, how are you?
Good. The Ten Commandments, when you put them back on the screen, which I would like a copy of, just echo 1 Corinthians 13, the verses, about being patient and being kind and, open to each other. That's just a thought I had when I saw that the second time.
Great. Thank you, Linda.
Okay.
Any other comments? So we're just going to push on now to another couple of points before we wrap up. We won't take too much longer. And then we'll have thoughts from Sam and Deborah. The third pillar is friendship. And the point that I want to make here is to focus on hurts. We're talking about wellness. One of the things that really interferes with people being well is how they deal with hurts. And the simple law, we might say, of humanity is that hurt people hurt people. When people have hurts, they cannot help but hurt others. And that's why, to be well as a human being, we have to deal with the things that are causing us hurt. And they may be there, they may be kind of just set aside for a long time. But if we haven't dealt with them, we need to deal with them for our own sake and for the sake of others. This point that hurt people, I'd like to describe it as a real lever for renewal. A lever to renewal for any person, because it gives us an opportunity or a reason to be able to move past the hurts that we have been suffering from, and also to move past hurts that we may have put upon others. Just to kind of test the wisdom of that statement, hurt people, we can think of the worst hurt that we ever suffered ourselves. And in a moment of being truthfully honest with ourselves about it, we would likely find that the person who caused us the most hurt that we've ever experienced was likely hurting when they caused that hurt to us. That's kind of the way it works. That we are hurt by others who are hurting. And we can think of probably the worst hurt that we ever caused others. And think back to the times and the circumstances that were going on in your own life. And you'd have to likely find that you yourself were hurting because of something else when you caused that most severe hurt. And that is why I think that notion is a real lever, as I would call it, to help people towards renewal and reconciliation. Because it gives us the reason to be able to forgive, the reason to make amends, the reason to say I'm sorry, and to seek and find ways to be able to move past the deep hurts in our own lives. Friendship is probably the most powerful means that we have to be able to identify deep personal hurts and to resolve them. Having at least one other person with whom we can share our story. Those of you who've attended sessions that I've done, I almost always use this paragraph one way or another from Henry Nouwen. He talks about friendship. He says, when we honestly ask ourselves which persons in our lives mean the most to us, we often find that it is those who, instead of giving much advice, solutions, or cures, have chosen rather to share our pain and touch our wounds with a gentle and tender hand. The friend who can be silent with us in a moment of confusion, who can stay with us in an hour of grief and bereavement, who can tolerate not knowing, not curing, not healing, and face with us the reality of our powerlessness. That is the friend who cares. And that's a powerful statement. That statement helps us to understand why people make such gains in their lives in dealing with things by having a friend. And it's largely because when we have an opportunity to share our story with someone else without having to edit it and screen things out and to be perfectly honest in telling our story, when we tell it to others, we're likely telling it to ourselves for the first time. To organize the story to tell it to someone else means I have to organize it for myself. I have to pick the words that describe my feelings, but also to explain probably why I'm having those feelings. And one of the simple laws of mental health and wellness is that the only way to get past a strong negative feeling is to focus on it. And for most people, the easiest way to focus on a feeling is to talk about it. And not to talk about the feeling in a kind of a philosophical or psychological language, but to talk about it in narrative, to tell the story of what happened that caused me to feel such anger or jealousy or resentment or whatever the case might be, how it came about, what it does to me, what are the things that bring it to mind and what have you. And those are things that help us move past the hurts in our lives and decide when and what I need to do about it. A simple activity on friendship is take a few moments to bring to mind your real friends. Think of people that are close friends in your own life. Take a moment to ask yourself, what do I do to maintain these friends? Am I making efforts to maintain these friendships, or are we drifting apart? Some of the saddest situations I've come across in my time, especially in counselling roles, was to meet people who had big problems and they felt that they were so alone, they had nobody to deal with them. I'd ask them about previous relationships and friendships, and sometimes they'd regretfully say, well, I used to have such good friends. And they'd often use that very word. They'd say, we drifted apart. There was never any major conflict or anything, but just the busyness of life. Sometimes feeling I was so important, I didn't have time to do this, that, or the other thing. And we drifted apart. And now that I need it, I'm ashamed to go to the person and ask them to engage as they used to. Think about the close friends in your life. Include here people that are probably relatives as well, spouses, family members, and others that you'd consider in the inner garden of friendship, as some would describe it. Probably a good gauge on it is say, are we close enough to notice each other's signs of distress? And are we honest enough to admit our distress? Is there anything I need to do to strengthen a friendship? Would be good things to keep in mind as you might look at the personal growth plan that I mentioned earlier. So we've looked at self-care. We've looked at going beyond ourselves to those that we work with and are engaged in more formal ways of teamwork. Looking now at those that we have more intimate and personal connection with, friendship. Last one I'd bring forward as a pillar is to have fun. Live the joy of the gospel, because we become what we do. I won't take long on this one, but it's worthwhile to kind of think of times in life that we might have experienced real fun or real joy, real delight and glee. You might think of the practical things in life especially when you were young and accomplished something that seemed like a challenge. learning to swim or learning to stand up on your skates or get up again after falling or falling off the bike or what have you. Times when you went to a new place, went away to school, went away, got a job, and you were there as a stranger, but how you explored relationships with others and discovered after a little while that there was someone that seemed to be a friend, and you were able to grow in that friendship and nurture it, and how much joy you found in life when you were able to find a new friend and discover someone you could trust. Or meeting up with somebody that you had drifted from, either by distance, geographically or emotionally, and reconnecting, and the great joy of that. How much fun there is in it. Or travel is another way that we sometimes experience a great delight for ourselves. Maybe you wind up taking a trip because it was the only thing available at the few dollars you had available and the time that you had available. And lo and behold, you go somewhat a bit dubious, or someone else is dragging you into it, and you discover it was the best trip of my life. Those are some of the times of real joy. Another few aspects about experiencing fun or having joy in real life things, ways that are available to us is one of the things I like to point out to people is that we need to be present. Just being present brings joy and happiness and fulfillment. I like to remind people that, interesting, we use the same word, present, for three things. The connection between in time from the past and the future. But we live in that present moment, that moment of intersection. We say the word present for being in a place, and present here in this building, this room. And we use that word for gift as well. We're pondering sometimes what it means to be the present, or to be the gift, or to be with someone. Are we really attending to it, or are we sometimes there but not really there, either in the time or in the place or as the gift, because we're so distracted with so many other things that we have on the go, and including using the technologies that are often in front of us, and we're at the table with someone for a meal, but we're checking our email or surfing the net or trying to look busy or important by the use of technology. The simple gathering for a chinwag, as I would call it, gathering just to have a chat. Not because we have any business to do or anything, but just to be present with one another and have a chat. How's it going and what have you. The fun of remembering things from the past, imagining and planning and relaxing and those types of things. A few ways to consider is having the personal touch. Human beings get more joy out of having the personal touch, the personal connection. I don't mean only physical touch, but that touch that comes from what's sometimes described for people who have leadership roles, people in ministry all have leadership roles, transformational leadership, that getting to know people, connecting as a person, knowing their names, remembering that the person had been ill or they had some particular issue and inquiring how they're doing with it and offering yourself to be available, those types of things. Respecting people as persons, and again, setting aside the devices. And to celebrate the successes. I mentioned those before, we don't need to repeat it again. And being flexible. Rigidity interferes so much with the joy of life. So the four pillars, to review them, that allow for a platform, we might say, on which to build to have balance, or self-care, teamwork, friendship, and have fun. Those are the few things that I offer for your reflection and so on. And you know what, we'll all go about doing that in our own way. I love the poem. Those who've ever done courses with me would know that I occasionally, I might say, mention sails and sailboats and the like. But this beautiful poem by a Church of England clergy in the 19th century about sailing was a good metaphor for how we go about finding wellness and what have you on our own. We have to all find what works for ourselves. And John Oxenham said, "One ship sails east and another west while the self-same breeze does blow. It's the set of the sail and not the gale that bids them where to go. So it is, as we journey on through life, it's the set of the soul that marks the goal, and not the storms and the strife. I brought up for you before the sample of the personal growth plan, and I'll make that available for you. But what I want to do now is I want to ask Deborah from Western Diocese to take a few moments to give a description of the clergy wellness program in your diocese. Deborah, turn on your mic so you can do that.
I'm here.
Great.
I just want to make one quick correction before I start. I noticed you introduced me as Deborah Howard, and my last name is Howe. And that's a small point. I just know there's a few people online that know me, and I didn't want to cause any confusion.
You didn't want them to think you're after changing your name, and I'm surprised at my email.
No, or I didn't want to give the wrong person credit or blame for my presentation either.
Okay.
So, thank you for inviting me to participate in this. I'm the wellness officer with the Western Diocese. This is a volunteer position. My background is in education, not in health, as some people sometimes assume. I suspect I was asked to fill this position because I've lived in the area most of my life, and I'm familiar with the resources that are around, or at least I know how to make the right phone calls to find out about resources. My main role as wellness officer is to enable our employees to access resources through our employee assistance program, and to do so with confidentiality. I'm going to read you just briefly the rationale behind our EAP. Personal issues can have a major effect on employees and their families. They may indeed affect their job performance. Such issues include, but are not limited to, physical, mental, or emotional illness, marital or family stress, financial or legal problems, or substance abuse. The diocese, parishes, and people recognize that assisting the individual to maintain or obtain a high level of job performance is to the benefit of all parties concerned. Subsequently, we have an employee assistance program. This program is meant to assist employees in securing the needed assistance at the earliest possible time to regain a sense of health and wellness. So in order to access the program, all of our employees have access to my email and my phone number. If the employee or spouse or dependent child is in need of any kind of professional help, and perhaps this is not covered under their own health plans or under government health plans, or sometimes there are other reasons they might want to access it this way, they will give me a call or contact me via email and just briefly outline the issue. I ask them only enough questions to get my head around what it is they need. I then find the appropriate provider and make the initial contact with the service provider, and I then instruct them that once the appointment has been set up, to send the bill to me. I'm then able to, or the bill and subsequent bills, I am then able to submit the bills to the Synod office with the employee's name removed, and this is to ensure their confidentiality and makes this program more accessible for people, because often people won't seek the help they need because perhaps they feel some level of embarrassment, or they just don't want their employer to know some personal things. Once the bill is submitted, the diocese then pays the bill. And again, this is just to ensure the privacy of the participants. I sometimes also take calls from people who are just looking for information related to different services, and I do my best to find that out for them. They may want to know the names of counselors that specialize in certain areas like marriage counseling or workplace stress or there's been requests for dietitians and that sort of thing. And then often they just make those appointments and deal with it themselves. But I've helped in that I've helped them locate the resources that they were looking for, whether or not they choose to request help from the EAP. The Western Diocese also has another program called Recruitment and Retention Program. And the purpose of that, I guess, is obvious from its title. It's to entice people to come to our area, and once they come, to stay. It provides, in addition to a cost of living allowance and a vacation subsidy for those employees who have been there for 5 years or have made the commitment to stay for 5 years, and a student loan assistance program. There is also one item in this program that links into our employee assistance program, and we refer to it as the weekend getaway. In our employee assistance program, one of the articles allows for funding activities that are proactive in nature, and we certainly consider a weekend away a proactive item. To access this, the employee would email me or phone me and just outline why they feel they need to have this time away. This benefit acknowledges that sometimes the best medicine is taking some time away from your parish. And as we know that sometimes, especially in the case of clergy, the lines between personal life and professional life are blurry and sometimes pretty much invisible, and the only way to get some respite from that is to actually leave your area. I then write a letter of recommendation that they receive this support. I think it's a very important benefit, as it is more proactive in nature. It can help eliminate stress before it becomes a serious health issue. And as I said before, sometimes the lines between personal and private life, particularly with the clergy, and maybe even more so in small areas, are very blurry. And our clergy sometimes find themselves ministering to people when in fact they're the ones that might be in need of ministering themselves. That's all I have to say on our programs, but I would like to thank you again for giving me the opportunity to explain my role as wellness officer with our diocese.
Great, thanks, Deborah. Again, I apologize for getting your name wrong on it, but we'll correct that.
Not a problem.
Good, but thank you for a good description, and it is impressive, particularly the interventions that are there. The preventive stuff makes such a difference, and
Yes,
in many cases, a matter of a person identifying and acknowledging that they need a bit of help earlier that makes all the difference, rather than.
And I think having someone in my role makes it a little easier for people to access this. Like they're more aware that these things are there now, and it makes it a little easier if you're not having to go to your employer to ask these questions.
Confidentiality aspect of it makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
Archdeacon Sam Rose, I'm going to ask you, Sam, to give a bit of an overview from the Eastern Newfoundland and Labrador Diocese.
Thanks, Rick. It's
click on your camera. You turn on your webcam if you want, Sam. Great, thank you.
Yep, I think it's there. Just wanted to say how appropriate this is at this time of the year, because for many clergy, it's the most wonderful time of the year, but it's also the most stressful time of the year in terms of services and communions and all those types of things. So I think it's very appropriate that Queen's has offered this at this particular time of the year. I just wanted to say that essentially what Deborah has described is essentially the exact same type of program that we have in our diocese through the EAP. Up until very recently, we did have a wellness officer. We're in the process of searching for a new person, and that will hopefully be announced very soon. However, one of the other other things that perhaps is a little bit more preventative than reactionary is for clergy to utilize their continuing education fund for retreats and other things like that that may be able to help in the process of self-care. One of the things that I've noticed in the diocese as an administrator for the diocese is that a lot of the concerns that come into our office are directly related to clergy care or wellness. And unfortunately, we have a tendency sometimes to see it as a reactionary model instead of a preventative one. So raising the awareness, I think, is paramount in terms of self-care for clergy, that they know that it is okay to have issues. The EAP, the Employee Assistance Program, as Deborah spoke so well about, does provide a number of financial opportunities for clergy to avail of for psychiatric care, counseling, and all of this is available for all of the clergy that are employed and lay employees under the diocese as well, who can utilize these benefits that are existing. One of the things that is sort of I guess a sticky subject, and I like the fact that Deborah is sort of in her position as a lay person who sort of can advise a clergy or another lay employee to come to her. There's also a sensitive line around the bishop as an employer, and also as the bishop. So when a clergy has a situation that he or she would like to talk about and does not feel comfortable talking about it with the bishop, as who is technically the employer, having that person in place, in harness in the diocese, and the issues around confidentiality and the sacred trust that we have in respecting that confidence is very important and paramount. We've seen a number of good news stories of priests and clergy and other people who come to us and through employee assistance programs are able to just say, you know, I just need a month off, or I just need some time away, or I need the help in this, and through that work, through their self-identifying of their issues and concerns, we're able then to point them in the right direction so that they can get the help that's so needed for them. So again, I applaud Queens for taking the initiative in this. Father John may remember back in over 20 years ago now, this was sort of a hot topic in our diocese, which created a clergy wellness protocol. And I just had an opportunity to, it's almost a 20-year-old document now, but it still has a lot of good resources and a lot of good practical advice to just reinforce what we've been talking about this morning. It's available on our diocesan website under forms and publications. You'll see clergy wellness. Some of it is dated. Some of the phone numbers and names are perhaps not even there anymore, but yet the practical rationale behind it is very solid. It was a good piece of work that was put together, and sometimes some of these old ideas are sometimes very good for today's use. So I applaud the Queens for picking up this very timely topic at this time, and certainly to thank you, Rick, for making this available to everyone today.
Great, thanks, Sam. Folks, I'm going to see if anyone has any other questions that they want to bring forward to either Sam or Deborah or Father John, either, who's been part of it. And anyone with any comments or questions? So just to wrap up then, we've covered the kind of scope of the topics. I just want you, before you go off today, to take a moment to think of one insight you've received so far today. Bear in mind at least one thing. In your own mind, not asking you to share it unless you want to. What difference will it make to you or to others? We've given you thoughts. Remember what William James said? Sow a thought, you reap an action. Sow an action, you reap a habit. Sow a habit, you reap a character. sow a character, you reap a destiny. If you have a thought today, or an insight from today's session, and maybe take the time to share that thought with someone else later today. Maybe it might be something that you're going to do to enter the new year with a desire to improve things for yourself or for others. We will be sharing, as I mentioned, the video, the link to this video, this presentation will be in a narrated PowerPoint form. It'll be on our Queen's College YouTube channel, so we'll send you along the link for that. I'll send a copy of those 10 commandments in case you want to have a look at them, or sometimes people take them to their committees or their boards or their vestries and just kind of have a look at it as a way of refreshing how you engage with each other. And I'll also send you a copy of the personal growth plan format. Any last comment from anyone? Father John, I'm going to ask you if you have any thought or idea to share before we wrap up.
Just to say, I think in my experience, clergy wellness begins with me. And I'm the only one that can work toward it if I'm willing to open up and allow somebody else to be a part of me. And that's a risk. And you mentioned risk before. It's a risk to let somebody else know that you're having a struggle, but it's freeing when you're able to do it. And so I think the more preventative we can be, the more well we'll become. And but you got to trust, and that sometimes you get burned in the trust, but there's lots of people out there who won't burn you, and you know, go for it. You look after yourself.
I just want to read a comment.
Yeah, Sam Rose again. Just to say also, in addition to that, one of the other really important parts of wellness certainly begins with ourselves, but it also has to begin with education for parishes that clergy reside in, because sometimes clergy could perhaps be surrounded by so many people but feel so completely isolated and alone that they have no one to speak to or no one to talk to. So I think one of the this goes back to the former to the current diocesan wellness program that we operate, that perhaps we need to do a little bit better in, is educating our parishes on the wellness of their clergy, because I think that it allows sometimes a more human face to be put on a person wearing a collar, as opposed to it being sort of an elevated type of position. So I think education for parishes, and I think this is perhaps a good step in terms of what we're doing here today, to simply share with parishes as dioceses and as queens ways in which parishes could share in that wellness protocol for their clergy.
Great, thanks, Sam. Kind of relates to what Christine Lynch typed. I'm going to read her comment. She says, so important to make a plan for our own wellness. We can get so busy taking care of everyone else that we forget about ourselves. And that is indeed the heart of the problem in most cases. Thanks, Christine. Any other comment from anyone? Well, folks, as I say, we'll be posting this link. If there's someone in your own domain that you think that would benefit to have a few insights on this subject, and if you think that the thoughts and ideas that have been shared with us today in the session would be of benefit to them, then you'll be able to send along the link to them. It can be a way of giving them a Christmas gift. It's a great old story. I'll just take a moment on it. One time this fellow went to see his doctor, and the doctor sent him to a psychiatrist and what have you. But anyway, when he went in to see the doctor, he was telling him how overwhelmed he was, so depressed and distressed and all the other words he'd put to it. And the doctor said to him, well, he said, I got the cure for you. The psychiatrist said. He said, oh, do you, doc? He said, yes. He said, you know what? Laughter and humor, he said, is very good for people. But he said, oh, don't give me that. He said, yes. He said, and the circus is in town, and they have this funny clown, Gorko. He said, he'd make the cats laugh. He said, go to the circus. Anyway, I said, that's not going to work for me, doc. He says, listen, I'm telling you, he said, everyone has been here to see me this week. I've sent them off, and that's been a cure for him. He said, you try it. He said, no, doc, I'm not doing that. He said, you do it. He said, no. Anyway, goes on back and forth, and eventually the fellow gets up to leave the office, and the doctor says to him, you go see Gorko the clown. The fellow walks out, slams the door. takes a few steps, turns around and goes back and he opens the door. He said, "Doc, before I leave this building, I want you to know that I am Gorko the Clown." So the point is we can often do the things for others, not do them for ourselves. And that's comes out in what Sam was saying, what John was saying, what Christine was saying, and certainly what Deborah sees in people that often present to her. And it's the risk. It's a professional health risk, burnout and exhaustion and so on, and just not simply looking after yourselves. So thank you for your attention. If you have any thoughts or ideas on other topics that we might pursue, I'll just give you a hint of ones that our committee is looking at for the new year. Of course, you might know that the Anglican Church of Canada has recently produced a paper on the theology of money. We're hoping to do something on that one. I'm hoping to have a session, probably the January session might be titled something such as what people in pastoral care need to know about depression. Because so many people that you meet up with are having feelings that they need some assistance with, and in many cases they're experiencing depression in one way or another. You need to know about that. Looking at a session to update on what's been happening with regard to the marriage canon since General Synod. So we're hoping to put together a session on that one in the new year as well. And there's one other topic that we've been looking at but haven't got it nailed down yet, and I can't even think what it is. But anyway, we'll have them out to you with times and dates and so on, if not before the new year, then early after the new year. So if there's anything else from anyone else, I'll ask one last time. If there isn't, then thank you all for your time and attention. If you have other suggestions or topics, as I say, send them along to me or just reply on the emails that go out to you from Queen's College. And if you have any thoughts or ideas also on things that we might do at Queen's College to help our students prepare for ministry in ways that will have it built into them to look after themselves, then send along that advice as well. Best luck to you all. Thank you for participating, and those who were in the snow zone today, one thing about looking after yourself is don't hurt your back. Take your time or get someone else to do it. Best luck. Have a good day. Bye-bye.